and welcome to the Doomloop Dispatch, the show that covers the worst parts of the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm your host, Kevin L. Jones, and we have a special episode today, a panel discussion with some super smart people on the Doomloop narrative. You know, the name of the show. Apparently, San Francisco is in a doom loop and it's gonna end. It's chaos everywhere, crime and empty buildings. Oh no! Wait, where does this come from? And why is it so prevalent in San Francisco when our eyes show us that the city really isn't in dire straits? I speak with three longtime veterans of San Francisco politics about the issue. Now, on to some headlines. It's been a crazy week. First, there are the Palestinian solidarity protests on college campuses, one of which is at Cal. I just love to see Berkeley's true spirit of protest still alive today. It just makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. Now, San Francisco Mayor London Breed just went to China and made a big deal of the tall buildings there.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. What do you think of this city? Well, it's beautiful. I love all the really tall buildings. And so we're looking forward to doing more of that in San Francisco.
She seriously looked like Hillary Clinton seeing fireworks at the 2016 DNC. What? Tall buildings? Wow. She also excitedly announced that she's going to bring back a pair of pandas with her, which, in my opinion, sucks. First off, it just came out in the San Francisco Chronicle that the 95-year-old San Francisco Zoo is a mess. There, they had a grizzly bear recently escape its cage, and zookeepers reported several other incidents where they felt unsafe because of the animal's ability to open cage doors. On top of that, according to Supervisor Asha Safai, the panda enclosure cost $25 million. She's setting up a campaign to pay for it, yet she recently cut $24 million budgeted for youth programs and made no effort to find new sources for it. It's also going to lead to some open corruption, as she is pushing the Board of Supervisors to pass a bill that allows her to accept private donations before meetings. Doesn't sound very above board, does it? I should also add that moving pandas from China is terrible. They've been doing it for decades, and until very recently, the pandas haven't been able to reproduce here. And just because two zoos, the Atlanta Zoo and the Smithsonian Zoo in DC, have been able to help their pandas reproduce, with the SF Zoo in disarray, I don't think they'll have the same success. Let's be real. Breed went to China because she's unpopular with San Francisco's Chinese residents. Really, she received an 80% disapproval rating from them, and they're a strong demo here. Typical of her administration, Breed's focused on her needs instead of the needs of the city. Now, over in Alameda County, a federal judge ordered embattled District Attorney Pamela Price to review all 35 of the county's death penalty cases. The order came after an investigation found that in one trial from 1995, prosecutors kept Black and Jewish residents from the jury because of their views on the death penalty. The case in question was the death penalty trial for Ernest Dykes, who was convicted of the murder of 9-year-old Lance Clark and the attempted murder of his grandmother, Bernice Clark, during a robbery at an East Oakland apartment complex. Dykes appealed his sentencing, and discovery found that prosecutors not only noted the jurors' opinions on the death penalty, they also made disparaging comments about Black and Jewish candidates during jury selection. The prosecutor, who was not named in reports, insulted a Black woman in the notes, calling her short, fat troll. Price's investigation is expected to take several months, but one thing is clear. This is an indictment of previous Alameda County district attorneys. The fact that they let prosecutors make racist assessments of juror candidates goes to show that they had misplaced priorities. Fair, objective trials should have been their goals, because it's the law. With crime being down and Price being tasked with these reviews, it makes no sense to recall her now. But the old white folks from Save Alameda for Everyone, or SAFE, push on, insisting on holding a special election ASAP, which would cost the county $20 million and only benefit their side by guaranteeing a low turnout. Now on to PG&E, the menace of a power company for the Bay Area. There were a glut of stories this week about what's going on with the company, and we should all be paying attention. First, the Sacramento Bee reported that PG&E is making its customers pay $6 million for commercials about how they're finally undergrounding their power lines. And when I say finally, I mean it. because they should have done it years before their old power lines caused multiple wildfires, which destroyed thousands of homes and killed several people. The story comes as the utility announces new fees, and another story reveals that PG&E CEO Patricia Poppe makes $17 million a year, making her the third highest paid energy utility CEO in the nation. On top of all this, the Washington Post ran a story about how solar energy isn't helpful because it decreases utility company profits. Let's be clear. All of PG&E's issues stem from the fact that it has shareholders. That has always been its issue. It's the reason we had the Enron scandal and blackouts in the early aughts. The fact that PG&E shareholders were prioritized over maintaining gas lines led to the San Bruno explosions. And because PG&E dragged its feet on putting electrical lines underground for cost reasons, that led to all the wildfires over the past couple years. Dozens of people have been killed and thousands have lost their homes because some rich jerks don't want to get real jobs and just want to siphon money away from a public utility. We need to change this. Now let's get to the real highlight of this show, my group discussion on San Francisco's Doomloop narrative. I speak with some seriously wonderful and knowledgeable people. It's a long one, and I don't want to waste another second of your time. So let's get to it. Alrighty, hello there, Doomloopers, and thank you for joining me for this wonderful discussion about the Doomloop narrative in San Francisco. We have some wonderful people here that are all have experience with lots of nonprofits in San Francisco, so they know what they're talking about. So why don't we go around and everyone introduce yourself? First, let's start with Noah, since he is the one that brought everyone together.
I'm Noah Sloss. I'm an English major. I'm a San Francisco public school parent and activist. I've just been interested in language and how it's used in politics for a long time. I was a blogger in the aughts, in the Bush era, and just reading about how language was manipulated to drive people to do some pretty crazy things. So that's me, I guess.
Wonderful. And Christin Evans, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure thing. My name is Christin Evans, and I guess I'm first and foremost actually a small business owner. I own the Booksmith in the Alembic in the Haight-Ashbury neighborhood. Got active in politics related to homelessness because of the challenges that our neighborhood was facing with chronic visible homelessness. And from basically 2018 till present, I've been a volunteer with the Coalition on Homelessness to do a variety of things, including I was a proponent for Prop C, which was a gross receipts tax on San Francisco's biggest businesses. It taxed companies over 50 million in gross receipts annually, a small fraction of a percent of a tax to help us raise approximately 300 million annually for basically four categories: housing, shelter, prevention, eviction prevention, and behavioral health services. And more recently, I took a position on the city's oversight commission for the homeless oversight. We oversee the $700 million that the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing budgets annually.
Oh, wow. Awesome. Well, thank you. And then Sarah, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Sara Shortt. I have a lot of hats and wear some of them sometimes. And I have some former hats. So let me think. I was the director, and I'm a dog owner, companion. I was the director of the Housing Rights Committee for 11 years. And I also spent 3 years on Skid Row in LA doing a homeless outreach program. And worked for Community Housing Partnership as the policy director for about 5 years after that. And what else, Christian? I have coordinated the treatment on what's called the Treatment on Demand Coalition, and also right now I'm consulting with the Drug Policy Alliance. So have done a lot of work around harm reduction and the drug crisis, overdose prevention, et cetera, tenants' rights, homelessness, economic justice more broadly, and probably some other things I'm forgetting. I also am serving on the city's mental health SF implementation working group, it's called. And so that is related to the mental health SF legislation that was passed a few years back. And I'll add other things as they come.
Oh, great.
I'm Gemini, and yeah.
Hey, I'm a Gemini.
Oh.
We know this. Yes, Kristen and I are twinsies here. So, yeah.
Oh, love it. Well, I'm a Virgo, so hopefully, everything goes well.
You'll keep us on track. You'll keep
Exactly.
us flaky, indecisive people on track.
Yes, I'm a perfectionist. Just you watch.
Perfect.
Awesome. Well, so as our listeners can tell, we have some serious knowledge here. We have some serious experts on these issues. What's going on with the doom loop in San Francisco, which apparently means everything's going to crap in the city. I mean, Noah, you're the one who really wanted to talk about this. Why don't you talk about how you first came into this narrative and, why it's just so, I guess the word, frustrating for somebody who lives here in San Francisco and actually sees what's going on.
Yeah. So yeah, no, something I forgot to mention is that I spend a lot of time on Twitter. So that's kind of how I know Sarah and Kristen and you. And I just started seeing it pop up a lot, and especially following people like Gary Tan. He brings it up all the time. But also politicians. Seen like Matt Dorsey talk about the doom loop and drug tourism and stuff like that. So I was wondering, what is it all about? And I think one of you, Sarah, Kristen, were like, what is this doom loop that people are talking about? So I try to put it together, and I think I try to sum it up as the doom loop narrative is a conspiracy theory that says progressive politicians and leftist activists work together to enable and encourage open-air drug use and homeless encampments as part of a money-making scheme to generate more clients for nonprofits, and in the more extreme versions, also working with the drug cartels.
Dang. That's so extreme. And they don't have anything to back that up. God dang.
None.
Anyway.
Nope.
It actually, I was going to say, it happens a lot where people challenge me on Twitter, like, oh, you're doing this to get money for your nonprofit. I'm like, what nonprofit? I don't have a nonprofit. I mean, my bookstore.
Yeah.
There's gotta be some kind of
but those same people are constantly lobbing that accusation at organizations that literally do not receive a dime of city funding, yet they keep perpetuating this false narrative that's why they're in the game, is to get more and more city money. They advocate for these issues because it's about getting city money to do self-enrichment, yet literally and well documented and publicly available information do not receive any city money.
Right.
It's the strangeness of the construct, right? Like, we have police officers that are city employees to implement public safety. We have firefighters that are city employees. We have people that work for the Department of Public Health that staff, General Hospital, and they're city employees. We approach homelessness with a broad array of nonprofits, and that was by design and deliberate. It was done during the era of Feinstein through Newsom through Lee to modern time. They basically constructed from like one city managed shelter to now 48 city managed shelters. And, we have over 16,000 people that are formerly homeless in subsidized housing in the city of San Francisco. So, we have essentially, through over 80 nonprofit organizations, created shelter and housing as a response to homelessness in our city, but they're not staffed by, thousands of city employees. Instead, they're staffed by these not by nonprofits, and people tend to not be as well paid and not receive the same benefits. So this kind of crazy, insinuation that this is a money-making scheme is pretty, out there. But
And
And-
not nonprofit bashing is definitely part of this doom loop narrative. And also just more of the framing related to, Noah's lens that he presented is the idea that the reason we're in a doom loop and why we have all of these social problems, poverty, gridlock, all of it, basically all of it, is because of progressive leadership. And also the progressive movement. And exactly. So that's another example of the spurious, sort of charges that are yet completely parroted and echoed repeatedly, and that have sort of, managed to stick is if you actually look at the composition of our city leadership, not just right now, but even some years back, the progressives are really in the minority in terms of having the actual power. So it's another example of how this is made up garbage. And it's very transparent, in my opinion, as to why that is, and that is the case, because with the agenda, it's out there to serve the agenda of getting rid of any remotely sort of left or progressive, or even, I would say at this point, far liberal, or what used to be basically a lot of the Democratic Party folks. Anyway, and so if you set it up as to that they're to blame, and you get people to believe in this idea that everything you see on the streets that's horrible right now is caused by certain individual people, really, who can therefore be removed, and also therefore what that posits is that the solution is getting people of the opposite ilk, and a different ideological bent, in opposition to their politics. That's the solution. And so that's why what the doom loop idea has set up is a nourishing, environment for all of these organizations to crop up, whose very purpose is to do exactly that, to unseat any progressive political or progressive or left political leadership, and even that's a broad definition of political leadership. Even people like all of us, even people who are activists in the community, or who are grassroots groups, and not even but and then to replace with the really what I would say are absolutely conservative politicians, that they part of this whole thing is also that they brand as, quote, moderate. And that goes along with their phrase they love to throw around, which is common sense. Sense. Yeah. We're like wackadoodles, but they're about common sense, when really that's a euphemism for right wing as hell. Yeah. And the classic example of this is two classic examples is what we saw with both the school board and with the district attorney. That is, case in point of what I just discussed. But now it's all very much ramped up based on groups and individuals and people with money being emboldened by those two things. And so I'm sure you're all prepared to talk about this, but then, so these groups, like every group that ends with SF, Together SF, Grow SF, Abundant SF, they're
It's politics.
they are disguising this very specific agenda of unseating progressive political power and replacing with conservative, political power, with this concern for the issues that are impacting the average San Franciscan, and even with things like compassion and effective, solutions and things like that. They are hiding this agenda behind those things. And so unlike, and I'll stop soon, but unlike the sort of old days where it's very clearly sort of, here's our conservative agenda and we stand behind it, we're very proud of it, and they have realized that San Francisco actually is a much more progressive and or at least liberal city, and that they cannot talk like that and get support. But if they couch it all in terms of what are liberal values, again, such as concern, such as environment, such as compassion, and a lot of like stuff around like sort of urbanism and livable cities and public safety, all those things, then they can pull off what is essentially a very, very actual right-wing play by getting with the support of people who actually aren't necessarily very conservative in their actual social values, particularly, but even in some of the others. And sorry, I have a lot to say about this. So
Yeah, I totally understand. But yeah. Oh, go on, Noah.
So I was just gonna say, yeah, I mean, it's when you like lay the conspiracy theory out, it sounds crazy. But as a narrative, it's a story and it has its own internal logic. And it's something that kind of sticks in people's brains. Like a fairy tale, like the wolf that eats the grandmother and puts the grandmother's clothes on and talks to Red Riding Hood, and you're like, but within the story, it all kind of makes sense. You're like, oh yeah, of course the wolf is talking to Red
the wolf
Riding.
being Dean Preston.
It's just like crazy how they exaggerate, like Dean's running the city, right? Like that he's the most powerful guy that's led to all these issues, right? He's like one guy on a board of supervisors of 11, and he is not the mayor. He doesn't have any control over the budget. But it is interesting that Breed is now becoming a victim of her own narrative, right? That, we're now seeing with, the ouster of Chesa Boudin and San Francisco's, the recall of the board members. And we saw a kind of wave of conservative people come into office in the last supervisor election, in part because of redistricting, right? Because the redistricting process jammed a bunch of progressives into a couple of districts and made the other districts more conservative.
Yep. That's why we got Joel and Guardio.
Exactly. But they just continue to, demonize Preston as a boogeyman, right? Of like in the DSA, and Jennifer Freenbach's in control of the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing. I mean, all like it doesn't make sense, right? Because the mayor is the person who selects her department heads, and she sets the budget, and the money is spent by her department. So I mean, I think it really preys on people that have a superficial understanding of how city government works.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there are all these sort of tricks and smoke and mirrors, such as the redistricting thing, such as huge amounts of funding from certain billionaires, but also certain sort of think tanks and things like that with their conservative agendas that are concealed, and that it's important to see the strings, but they're but like I said, it's all couched in other terms to people who are also not that informed about kind of those connections as well, Kristen. And so I'm thinking about for instance, I know we're all thinking Gary Tan and and some other obvious, Chris Larson, and but Michael Schellenberger is another. Yeah, Michael Schellenberger is another example. He does it a little differently. Like he funnels his money through a nonprofit, Environmental Progress. But this, for instance, this notion that Jenny Friedenbach, who's the Coalition on Homelessness director, controls the city budget. Literally, that's what is said in his book, San Francisco. That a lot of people. A lot of people believe that because he wrote that in that book. And so, but they don't connect the dots. They don't connect, oh, that trope is from his book. And he is this guy who has this very specific agenda. And he is this guy who then funds this group and that group. And, people don't. And so I think that that's really, really important to sort of expose all of that, the inner mechanisms and everything. And it is why it's incredibly problematic right now that we do not have much of a progressive media. We do not have a lot of investigative reporters who can spend the time or who will spend the time on looking at all of that and putting it out there. And so thank you, Kevin. That's all it wind up to lead back to. Thank you for jumping in, Kevin. Really important stuff.
Some great episodes. I wanted to say too, I mean, I think the Doomloop narrative really is kind of a summary of San Francisco. It's all of the elements are in there, and it's kind of like a memified version of that book. Just to like talk through the narrative and just we can talk about maybe the elements of the narrative, right?
Love it. Kick it off.
There's a crisis. There's a backstory, like why is the crisis happening? Then there's villains, of course, and then the heroes who save the day. So, for the Doomloop narrative, the crisis is, I'm just going to read this summary. Crime is rampant in San Francisco. Homeless encampments on sidewalks, feces, open-air drug markets, public drug use. You've probably seen all these things personally or in viral videos, and it made you feel unsafe. And the crime makes businesses leave the city, which causes lower tax revenues, and in turn, that causes lower crime.
Yep.
And that's kind of there is like a academic version of the Doomloop that is the urban Doomloop, if you on Wikipedia, and it's about it's just a theory that's pretty sensible that due to the pandemic and work from home, a lot of downtown office buildings emptied out because people were working from home. Businesses didn't need them anymore, and that causes problems for cities. But the Doomloop narrative does not take that into account at all. It's businesses leave because the CEO was walking to work. They saw a homeless person and they were like, "Oh, we're out. We're done. We got to move to a different city."
And I want to kind of address that for a second because it is so interesting. I mean, admittedly, sure, the report from the Chronicle just came out that the downtown has seen a decrease in sales taxes of 40%. And for the city, that is a big deal because it is an economic driver. But at that same time, it's never about blaming the businesses. It's always trying to find, and business decisions, it's always trying to make it a different narrative. It's almost like, sure. But over here, look at this, Here, let's put up another video of some people having the Fenty bends in the middle of the street. That's the problem, not these bad business decisions, And so much of that is, it's not only to make this narrative to get what they want, because they clearly have some kind of goal. I mean, personally, I think it's about real estate. Personally, I think there's a lot of investment, and I mean, they're taking it so seriously. Gary Tan is in DC outside of the Supreme Court, because he wants to find out how the influential Grant Pass case goes down, which could basically legalize homelessness, or at least criminalize. Thank you. That's the word I'm looking for. Criminalize sleeping on the street, and how cruel and awful would that be? But what does removing homelessness do? Upset curb appeal. There goes your property values skyrocketing high, even though no one can still afford to live here anyways. But so yeah, there's so much disinformation to kind of address that we should definitely kind of jump into, especially about the for one, the nonprofits. Let's talk about that. That is the system they chose. You could have the government do everything, but these right wingers don't want government doing everything. They want tax money to go to outside people, so maybe it's just the wrong nonprofits getting the money.
Well, they want private industry to do it. Let's face it. It's all a wind up for privatization. And so you said real estate. That's absolutely a big part of it. But at the end of the day, it's about profits. It's about business interests. All of this, whether it's about deregulation, privatization, as you said, making money off of real estate and development. It's that's the ultimate agenda. So when I just say like, oh, they want conservative people in there and they want political power that's not the end goal. The end goal is money.
Oh,
sorry,
yeah.
Kristen, go, Kristen. Kristen's going to get more brilliant here.
I grew up in the Bay Area, and I have seen the politics and the politicians evolve over time. But there's this very popular concept of neoliberalism in the 90s through the early noughts. And basically, the concept was that government was getting too big, too expensive. Employee pensions were bankrupting municipalities, and we really needed to streamline how things were done. And so outsourcing was a big thing, and figuring out how to really reduce costs and do the same service, higher quality with fewer resources. And so when at the same time, we had this growing challenge of homelessness, right? Because we had a situation where the affordability in our state got really out of control, right? So what was happening is we were restricting development, but at the same time, the economy was going gangbusters. We had, the first .com boom, we had the second .com boom, we had the third wave, right? Like, and San Francisco was at the epicenter of that boom bust cycle. So with each subsequent economic boom and without growth of the housing stock, and with employers being primarily technology companies attracting people from all over to work here, we created an affordability crisis. And so we at the same time had just a massive amount of homelessness that was developed. So if like people that try to blame homelessness on the drug epidemic, they're really missing a big part of the story, right? Because certainly the drug epidemic has complicated this challenge of solving homelessness, but it's not the root cause. I mean, we can point to other states where they have equally as high overdose rates, but they have a fraction of the homelessness rates that we have here in California and in San Francisco. And that's really all about the cost of housing. So when you're a disabled person receiving like a Social Security disability check, if you're in the state of Tennessee, Kentucky, you can find housing that is covered by your fixed income. In San Francisco, the fixed income for those individuals is like the housing costs are like 2-3 times as much as the amount of money people were receiving on a monthly basis. So it doesn't cover it. And so we need subsidized housing. And so we've really created a real problem for ourselves where we have really, benefited from all the growth in the economy, but we've not invested back in our communities. And so we've created a massive amount of poverty and income inequality in our society.
Yeah, and that is such a great point. That is such an important point because again, this is one of those things where the Doomloop narratives wants to blame progressive politicians for causing this homeless issues and everything else. Or, there's even the discussion of NIMBYism and everything else. And it's like, it's just these kind of straw men because, I mean, honestly, Dean Preston wants to build. Aaron Peskin wants to build. I don't know what's going on. But the thing is, too, is that I was working at KTVU after the Twitter tax break went down. And that's when you saw an almost like what was that movie Far and Away with the homesteaders? It was almost like that, but with new landlords rushing in to buy up everything and then kick out, evict anyone they can, especially all these people that had lived here for so long on, assistance, that, and truly these were the people that made San Francisco what it was. These were all the artists. These were all the creatives. These were people, the characters, that really made it such a wonderful, fruitful, fun place to live. And so I just wanted to kind of access that it's so funny how there's still this whole thing is always managing to get away from them and to push the attention away from what is actually their responsibilities.
Yeah, another great example of this, very much kind of related to the Twitter tax break, is the Whole Foods drama. Whole Foods opened a grocery store, on Market Street, like pretty much across from UN Plaza, which was what it was when they moved there, and opened up, and that neighborhood was what it was. And if I don't know who's watching this, if they don't know, very, very impoverished neighborhood, all of it. And particularly one with a lot of homelessness, a lot of people congregated outside who are very poor. Yes, using drugs, yes, trading and selling things, et cetera. And yet when Whole Foods closed, so part of it is they, put out a certain, line about it. But they didn't have to say very much at all. They didn't even. And there's plenty of evidence and information just right on the surface of all the reasons why they likely closed, which has to do with their profit margin and, all that stuff. All that unimportant stuff. But the narrative was, it was the neighborhood, rampant homelessness and open air drug use and, all of that caused it. Yet in this situation, there are other situations where it's all about like the neighborhood deteriorated and there was all this decay and, and crime came and then we're forced out as the business, but in this case, again, it's even more easy to sort of poke holes in their message. And again, this was a message carried by so many, including the mainstream media and, politicians, et cetera, that Whole Foods hardly had they had a little, role in perpetuating, but, or putting out there, disseminating. They literally looked at a neighborhood that was full of, all this stuff, homelessness, drug use, open, and mental health disabilities and things like that. And they decided this is a good market decision. They made that goddamn choice to as an investment that was supposedly a model to profit, to earn profits. Through placing that store right in that location at that very time, which was, I think, just post-pandemic. I can't remember, but very, very blighted, I would say, in that area and all that. And what it shows is, number one, you're full of shit with this idea that it's the homelessness that, and if that really is true, then what you're indicating is how goddamn, what a stupid business people you are. What stupid fucking business, what non-business acumen you have, right? If you decided where should we open a high-priced, store that sells artisanal, organic, right? And where would we have a good customer base for that? But it also shows this very sinister and indeed very harmful, idea or premise behind it all, that the city, if you go in and you're like, we're here to make money, we want to make money, here we are, the city will bend over backwards in terms of policies, in terms of decisions about spending, in terms of allocating resources, et cetera, in terms of directing departments, to create a environment that is conducive to you, for you to make profits. So in this case, what that meant was like cleaning up UN Plaza, that they would go out and sweep homeless people, that they would crack down on drug users, arrest a bunch of people, that they would basically gentrify this area that was like beyond whatever the opposite of gentrification is, beyond, I guess blight, but I think it's even in this case, even, maybe. And so they were literally banking on this idea that San Francisco, the city of San Francisco and the political leadership will do the bidding of business interests, especially big corporate business interests, and will clear the way, even in sort of the most dire and most like sort of where the gap is the highest, to, whether it's about allow for more development in that area, so you get more of these high income earners who can buy that stuff and create the market and the demand, or like I said, whether it's sweeping homelessness, whether it's policing. Policing is a big one in general. And by the way, that's all part of this whole Doomloop agenda that we sort of skirted around, maybe inferred, but a very, very clear part of this too is increasing law enforcement presence and funding and power and all that. And again, that's only a means to the end. That also is in the service of business interests and profits and all of that too. Because that's a hard one to just be like, well, it sucks that they are really pro law enforcement and they want to have a police state, and that's just gross, and but it's also like, but why? Why do they want it? Is it just because they love cops and want to get them like good salaries? There's more to it, right? So anyway, Whole Foods is still just like burning me up. Sorry, there's just certain like emblematic moments or things that. And one more thing about the Doomloop, because somebody brought it up. It was an actual term, and it actually, I believe, was the Chronicle who was referring to that very specific term when they wrote a story that was more about sort of the hollowing out of downtown and like losing big corporate and chain businesses and retail and stuff. They weren't concerned about small business, right, Kristen? We'll have you talk about that. And that it actually got hijacked like heavily to mean a very different thing than actually it was both originally intended or meant in the academic term, but also even in the original sort of print. And I talked to, I guess I won't say, the reporter at the Chronicle who actually first wrote that story, and he's sort of a little bit confounded, a little bit maybe even regretful. I won't speak for him, but this is what I interpreted, and that like, whoa, that's not what we were talking about here. And now everybody's saying, oh, Doomloop, and and it means this other thing that leads to all these other sort of automatic conclusions and all this.
Yeah. And that's the bringing up the investment in cops, I think is a really good thing about this Doomloop narrative that we've kind of touched on, about how they are pushing solutions, quote unquote, that we know don't work. I mean, we've always funded the police. The police is, was it per capita? We pay San Francisco more than any other, San Francisco cops more than any other city in the nation. And it still hasn't made a difference. I mean, come on. Soma used to be one of the most dangerous areas in the, in the nation. And so it's so funny, but so much of it, I think, is back to that original purpose of protecting property. But it's so funny too. You bring up Whole Foods, you can see that same kind of stuff going in with the Tenderloin and with around 16th and Mission, or, oh, look at crime, look at all the drug, people. And it's just like, have you been here before? Like, like, have you even been in the city? I mean, it's not that hard to know that that's how it was. And it was infamous for that stuff. I mean, it was always known for the issues there. Why is it an issue now, though? Well, because people are buying up those buildings. But yeah, why do we even think too? Do they think using old solutions is going to convince people that it'll make everything better again?
It's just really easy, right? Like the scenario that Sarah was going over with the Whole Foods. There's a lot of complex business things happening, but it's a lot easier to say, no, there were homeless people around and that scared off the customers, or they were going in and stealing soap or whatever, and they had no choice but to shut down. They're like, but yeah, that if you think about it for more than a few minutes, it doesn't make any sense. And that I was going to go to the next part of the narrative, the backstory, like how do we get here? Why is homelessness and crime, which to them is the same as homelessness, why is that so much? And for them, it's the drugs, period. Like, drugs cause crime, homelessness, mental illness, and then progressive politicians, policies, and cultural attitudes encourage and enable drug use. The undocumented drug dealers are not immediately deported. Open-air drug markets and encampments are tolerated. Clean needles and aluminum foil are provided. And sobriety is not required for permanent supportive housing, or, until recently, cash assistance. This attracts drug dealers and drug addicts, drug tourists, to San Francisco from all over the country and the world. So that's another, simple answer to a complex problem. Why is there so much homelessness in San Francisco? It's drugs and progressive, ex-hippies. They just believe that, do whatever you want and it's fine. And they're the ones who are, in charge of things. So it's basically, it's the drugs. They cause all the problems and they cause homelessness and crime. That's according to the narrative.
And we know that's not true. Yeah, sorry, Sarah, go on.
No, just a little quip, as if people of other classes and backgrounds and et cetera don't do drugs. Like, that is sometimes one of the most maddening parts of that whole thing is like, do you really believe, like, have you been to Dolores Park? Have you seen everybody high out of their mind there?
That's
like, and they're partiers and they're, young people, they're not like, homeless, but we don't talk about that. Have you been south of Market late at night? When the bars get out, have you, there's a lot of examples. Probably, I don't know because I'm not in that, but have you been to these tech offices, like in the bathroom? It's just like ridiculous that all of the focus around, drug uses, whatever basically happens open air, what is in public, what you see. And part of the reason for that is this conflation of, homeless people and homelessness with the drug crisis and overdose deaths and all that, because if your extreme like tunnel vision is around people who are only the people who are doing drugs are affected by the drug crisis, who are doing it where you can see it, then by nature you're focusing on people who are homeless. Because believe me, nobody who's doing any of those kind of drugs is like excited about being all viewed and just being like having their whole like life out, in pain and and basically what is it, substance use disorder all out there happening right there, in front of everyone. And so to say that that's the not only like the most important part of the problem, but the problem only is to, again, criminalize, villainize, stigmatize, homeless people, because they're the ones who have no other choice but to be experiencing that disorder in the public's eye.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it's
Become
not
part of
like
the-
you don't. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, it's not like you don't see dudes in business suits smoking crack on the street, too. I mean, that is a very
Well,
real thing that happens,
even our Governor Newsom, is supposedly in recovery. But
Mountains of cocaine. That was literally like Scarface level on his desk at times,
Allegedly.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was
allegedly.
going to say that's something I heard, but
Some people have alleged.
drugs are very much part of our culture in all socioeconomic levels. But I mean, I think Sarah will tell you this because she's the expert too. But when people are experiencing homelessness, it is a very traumatic experience when they're trying to survive. And what we know is that people do actually increase their substance use when they're experiencing homelessness. And so, like it's this situation that you're going to, of course, see very visible use of drugs amongst the homeless population. If you want to end that, you need to actually address their homelessness. So, we need housing as part of a public health solution. We need more drug treatment. I'm not opposed to sober living, but the way that the sober living initiatives are being pushed right now, it's a zero-sum game, right? They're basically cutting into existing pools of housing funding and trying to do set-asides as opposed to growing the overall pie to house more people. So it's really problematic because we want people to have the ability to have stable housing, and if they relapse and they're in a sober living facility, they can turn right back and face the homelessness again, right? And so it's great to have sober living as an alternative and an option, but it should be additive to what we've got now and not a zero-sum game, which is unfortunately politicians like Matt Haney, who know better, are now pushing for, changing housing first policies to shift resources towards residential treatment programs. And that, we need more. We need more housing and we need more residential treatment. We don't need to start making it so that the folks that will be um, qualifying for benefits and qualifying for housing are being held to a standard they won't be able to meet. I mean, that's by design. We know that a certain percentage of people are going to relapse. So it's a self-defeating policy to basically say we're going to just accept a certain level of failure and people are going to return to the streets.
and this leads into another or related thing about this is that it's just so fucking Orwellian, right?
Yeah.
In terms of the language stuff, and so that people have been advocating for housing for homeless people for decades are being called they're being told they're not pro housing, they're anti-housing, they're blocking housing, all these people and that you look at their record and they've been the most vocal about trying to get affordable housing or advocating for solutions to homelessness. And so it's gotten to the point, I think the best illustration of this is that there really is an argument out there. There really literally are people saying housing is not the solution to homelessness. You guys, and making it seem like we're just batshit crazy by suggesting that maybe if you don't want people on the streets living in tents, you might want to provide them with housing. No, that's
We don't even provide
crazy.
adequate.
What are you talking about?
adequate
Housing
places.
is not the solution to homelessness.
Yeah.
People who don't have housing, providing them with homes is we're barking up the wrong tree here, And it's so this stuff is very gaslighty. Go ahead,
Yes.
Kristen. Sorry.
No, I was gonna say we don't even provide like basic access to emergency shelter for the majority of people experiencing homelessness, right? I mean, that's the insane thing is that we have something close to 9,000 people experiencing homelessness, and we only have about 3,300 shelter beds. And so it's like a pretty crazy thing where, to say that the housing advocates are against shelter or they're against housing, it's the antithesis, and I guess it's very Trumpian, right? Because he's taking the weaknesses of that people accuse him of, and then turning them into strengths, right? And by basically making it seem like the person is the opposite of what they are. And I guess that's what you meant by Orwellian.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's moralizing too, right? It's like housing is a treat, it's a reward for good behavior. And if people who use drugs are bad, and if you reward them with housing, they will do more bad things. But they're, they've been housed, they're no longer homeless. It's like, no, they're bad and they don't deserve it, right? So they're like, instead of housing first, it's right, stop being addicted to drugs first.
Yep.
Which
No, they're literally they coined a new term called recovery first. Like, that's real. Little do they know, all of the shit that they're proposing that is like, whoa, we have innovative solutions that, are different, alternatives to what, has failed. All of them are completely retrograde, solutions. They're all the basically what was for decades, maybe, millennia. No, I don't know. Were the status quo. They really literally were. And that is why we got to these other things like housing first and harm reduction, in part because those failed. And this was, these were the innovative solutions. And also because they were based on actual research and evidence and proven to work. But, that's a minor point. But so it's also crazy making, like I said, gaslighty, that these things that were actually the way things were for so long are now being touted as if they're like, the sexy new thing that's gonna, whether it's whether we're talking about coerced treatment, mandatory and voluntary treatment models, whether we're talking about law enforcement solutions, or we're talking about when I started doing housing stuff in the, maybe early 90s, it was all about, and this was about, homelessness housing. It was all about people needed to be housing ready. They needed to be in shelters and then transitional housing and then learn how to be, in housing and all this stuff before they could be housed. And so that's no different. We switched to the opposite of like, no, people need a roof over their heads like this before, you deal with all the other stuff. But now they're taking us back. And so it is very MAGA in a lot of ways. And I think what Kristen's point is really, really, worth discussion is that I'm not sure that any of this could be happening in the way that it's happening now and be taking hold so much without Trump, without us having the Trump effect, and without the fact that we are now in the world of alternative facts and where science and evidence-based and research, is not really valued anymore. And as a matter of fact, even discounted, and people almost recoil from that now, and the fact that you can just get away with amazing amounts of disinformation, misinformation, and just basically lies. That's all it's all very, very Trumpy. And our people here, some of them, like some of our politicians, and some of our, very much consider themselves liberals, or like I said, even progressives. The mayor has called herself progressive. She said San Francisco's progressive. They fashion themselves this on the one hand, and they rail against Trump when it gets some votes or whatever. And they may even believe that, but they're absolutely adopting and exploiting this thing that Trump completely if not created, made
platformed
a cultural phenomenon, or whatever, gave life to. I don't know.
Words have no meaning.
Yeah.
It's
and
like you say whatever you want. And it's just like the one thing, the initiative that passed in March to require drug test for cash assistance was originally a Republican thing in Florida, the Republican governor of Florida,
DeSantis.
And then when it passed, they came out with an article. They're like, no, it was really progressive. It was a totally progressive thing. It's like nothing means anything anymore. It's
that Lee Edwards, goddamn, with the whole, and what's great about Pinochet? He threw communists out of the helicopter. But what this also brings me to is also talking about money and entrenched economies, entrenched businesses. I mean, seriously, let's be real about it. Rehab is a business, and it is a very lucrative business. It's the same thing with prison bonds, or bail bonds, all that stuff. This is all big industries that are entrenched into our system that, as we tried to push out, they were stuck in it. It's like the whole thing where, like, we can't stop making pennies, even though no one uses pennies anymore, because they pay off the nickel industry, and the nickel industry needs us to make pennies. It's that kind of thing. We still need to make drug addicts so we can give them treatment, and we still need people in jails. And what's even crazier is, what kills me is that now a part of the doom loop narrative is the increase in overdoses. Well, it's kind of funny, because one thing we know worked to decrease overdoses, and that was the Tenderloin Center. And how long did that last? Months,
A year.
months.
1 year. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was very frustrating because, Breed at one point was really embracing safe injection, safe consumption sites. And they are proven to work, and they worked in San Francisco. We actually saw a temporary decline while that center was open in overdoses. And that's because they were reversing overdoses in that location. And people had a place to go to consume invisible site of health practitioners, right? And so when you took it away, you basically took away the eyes and health professionals from the people that were needing supervision, that were opting into supervision, right?
And
Go ahead.
no, my sound, I didn't realize you were still going. Go.
Okay. And so yeah, when it closed, we saw the overdoses shoot up right away again, and that's just been one of the most frustrating things to see, unnecessary deaths, because Mayor Breed couldn't take the heat of some politics, right, from her right.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And I mean,
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Noah. Sorry. My
sorry.
sound is being weird. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut people off.
It's like I've brought it up with people on Twitter. They're always like, oh, look at all these overdose deaths. Drugs are the problem. They're ruining everything. Look at all these deaths. Then you bring up the Tenderloin Center, decrease deaths. Like, no, not like that. It's not the overdose deaths are not the thing that they have the problem with. They don't care. It's people doing bad things and people, sinning, having personality failures, and doing and being allowed to do that, or even encouraged to do that.
And Noah, digging deeper, like part of or a huge reason why people don't want that, and why it's very nonsensical that they complain about visible homelessness and then oppose supportive housing. They complain about open air drug use and then oppose safe consumption sites, right? And you're like, what is it? And so it sort of reveals, some things like that. Okay, so then what are their solutions then? Okay, it creates a very, very narrow window of what could possibly be the solutions, which basically is like death, law enforcement, and shipping people away, which a lot of these same people do propose. And which relates to that drug tourism, trope too, is why that's kind of a setup. But and then but these people, at the end of the day, like I see a theme here, property values. These NIMBY neighbors that run out and complain about either a potential supportive housing or existing supportive housing or a shelter, or or even just homelessness and drug use. It's generally actually about their extreme fear. Like it's a visceral, like, panic. You can see an anxiety and like trigger. It's like PTSD or something practically with some of these people, but their extreme fear that they will lose the value of their property and not be able to either refinance enough or support their investments, or earn a sizable profit when they sell. That's really it's really at the heart of it, and the fact that, like, again, it used to be these assholes would come out to those community meetings and stuff, and they would just very directly say that my property, and some of them are, believe it or not, I've heard, but again, overall, it's always now they caught on to, like, well, in San Francisco that doesn't really play, but what does play is like, we're really concerned. It's basically IRL concern trolling, right?
Yes.
If again, I feel like to some extent, it's not everything, but if we can, with all of this, again, expose what the real agendas are and what, maybe, and then back to the smoke and mirrors thing too, is it's also related to how like piles of money are dumped into certain measures, whether it's legislation or ballot measures or just policy, lobbying people to get certain policies, and or setting up fake community organizations where you get a bunch of citizens to come and then you say there and then you train them to speak out on a certain thing, and whatever, right? That's the other kind of smoke and mirrors thing, is that's then turned into a look. There's grassroots, resident outcry about public safety, about wanting to see an end to drug tourism, about whatever the thing is, right? And that's the other thing that really disturbs me, is that even like with the outcome of the election, all this talk about like this proves that the voting positions and the values, the political values of San Franciscans have really changed. Oh my God, look at that. Our city has really changed in terms of what people care about and what they, and it's like, or with, an incredible bombardment of money and like marketing, basically a marketing campaign, and like years of work gone into like, all of this, again, it's smoke and mirrors that's not being acknowledged. And then they can make all of these claims about how like, look at that. Our cities, we've got different type of thinking going on in San Francisco now. Wow, whoever thought that? And like, wow, that's such a news story, because it's so in contrast to like what our history has been and who we think of ourselves as. And wow, we could get a lot of coverage of how much we've changed because it's just gotten so bad, it's just all just, it's like, Potemkin Village, and, there's all sorts of, I think, metaphors and terms for this, but it's like fakery.
yeah, it's so gross too, how much of it is just like the right all over the nation going like, look, we're winning in San Francisco. How much that is, and how much of it that is a motivation, when honestly, if you've been here, there's always been this balance. I mean, absolutely. Kamala Harris became DA because she promised to go after pot smokers. I mean, like literally, like it's always had this, but it's like just so ramped up, and to the point now where, you have these disgusting exploitive media campaigns like That's Fenta Life. Like, I mean, which is just exploiting, what these people are going through. I mean, it's bad enough you have a whole army, and I want to say, I mean, there's quite a few of these guys, just I think they must be paid somehow to just walk around the city and video people, bending over and overdosing on drugs, and it's just to make the city look bad. Now, do they add the context? Do they show it's like this one certain area, and then you go to Dolores, you go anywhere else and it's like pretty and quiet and a nice neighborhood? No, they want you to like, I get it all the time on Twitter where it's people going like, yeah, have you seen the footage? I mean, that place must be covered in poop and needles, and it's like, it's really not, And
don't you dare post a positive, pretty calm, peaceful picture of this city right now. Honestly, I mean, I'm saying from personal experience, like you will be just barraged with insults and threats, and how dare you show any kind of positive picture of the city.
What were you saying, Noah?
Oh, just I've seen it on Twitter happen to tourists who like come to visit San Francisco to take a nice picture of a park or landscape. They're like, "What about the Tenderloin? Why are you not taking a picture of there?" I mean, and like you guys were saying, I mean, I think sometimes we forget like Bay Area is home to like the tech industry and the tech money and the technology, but it's also like the tech hype machine, the tech advertising industry.
Mhm.
And I mean, a lot of those same people are working for like Together SF. They have like a staff of 15 people working full time,
Or I think, yeah.
doing propaganda and doing advertising. They're like full-time workers. Some of those people that take the videos in the Tenderloin, they are paid by Schellenberger himself. I think Emily Mills has tracked down some of those receipts. So, I mean, it doesn't just happen, right? There's a lot of money and effort behind it, and it works on some folks, especially when there's no media where the other side can be heard.
Yes.
And we haven't quite talked about a little bit, but like there's the problem of not having that alternative media and or progressive media, all that. There's the problem of having some mainstream or papers of record that are absolutely super mirroring the all this stuff, right?
Yes.
And being a mouthpiece for it all. But additionally, as there are these very same billionaire assholes who are funding all these political efforts, who have their own media outlets, right?
Yep.
Who
Voices
actually
of San Francisco.
create. They get to create the news, not even just in that. Well, I'm thinking the Standard
Yeah.
too. Amazing what happened with the Standard. It's like kind of unbelievable that was all just able to happen in the way that it did, especially with the whole parallel of Together SF. And again, all of that is, and then at Together SF, which is funded by Michael Moritz, the venture capitalist, billionaire, who has made very clear his politics. And anyway, so he funds
and has
this.
Documented financial interests in real
Yeah,
estate.
yeah, exactly. And so he creates this grassroots nonprofit that gets to organize the citizens and push their political agenda very clearly, and simultaneously creates a newspaper that then covers things like the issues that group is pushing at City Hall, or the very same like complaints and criticisms they have that we've been talking about of like attacking progressives, that Standard loves to bash nonprofits, and attacking social programs. And it's like, it really is remarkable to me that all of that can just happen. And actually, we talk about sort of how a lot of it is obfuscated, and how a lot of the public average sort of voter is just doesn't, they're not aware, and all of that. But at the same time, wow, it's incredible what happens in just like broad daylight.
Yeah.
Right? What all of this that's just not being like remotely hidden at all, and it's just like actually pretty in your face, and yet it's still just, it's again maybe sort of the Trumpy stuff of like, it doesn't matter, nobody cares,
And
I don't know, I'm not sure.
Yeah. And even worse, I basically got out of local journalism because I was seeing it done in real time behind the scenes of people picking and choosing their stories, what they wanted to cover, the narratives that they chose, the things that they ignored. I mean, not only do you have the Heather Knight strategy of, oh, it's an opinion piece, and then reads like a profile, and yet there's all these things being left out. There's all these things that she's making claims but not backing up under that umbrella, but she can do that under that shield of, but I'm an opinion writer, I'm an opinion columnist.
Right?
Yes, exactly. And then on top of that, I mean, literally just what the reporters choose to report on. I mean, with a lot of it is, and I'll say this, just to provide some background, a lot of it is because of the relationships the media has with these certain parties, especially the police. If the newspapers, publications, especially TV news, don't have a good relationship with the police, they will not be able to make a show. They need all those moments. They need all the car crash footage. They need all the fires, and they don't hear about that stuff, or they don't get that unless they have these relationships. And it's yeah. And now it's getting even worse, where you literally have, you have these, you have the Marina Times. In Berkeley now, you have the Berkeley Scanner, which is heartbreaking for me. That is a reporter I used to work with, Emily Ragusa. We both went to Cal J School, so I'm just going like, you should know better. But you can see the bias in her reporting, where she's all about the recall going through, but at that same time, not reporting about how, how Price is going to be reviewing every death penalty case, because it's come out that that previous prosecutors were being racist in their jury selection. So it's a big, and it feels so much when everything is coming around, and everything feels like it's kind of against the good parts of the city and it feels, literally, like Gary Tan has been very open about how he wants to take it over. Now, we should kind of wrap up. We've been talking for a while, so I would like to kind of end of things to try to be positive. Like, what are some positive developments that you're seeing, and what gives you hope during all this that makes you want to keep fighting, to keep working, and to not give up? You can start, Noah.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I mean, the thing that comes to mind is like people like us meeting each other and working together. And I never would have met a lot of the people that I met through Twitter in, just going about my daily life. So that's pretty cool. And just trying to, and we're all trying to push back on this massive machine and trying to figure out how to, pick it apart, and maybe it can be useful to, people in other cities, because what happens in San Francisco tends to spread. So
exactly.
Yeah, I would say I keep in mind that the recall of Chesa and the school board members happened in special elections. We have had, redistricting that's altered some of the politics. But, I think that there's an overblown narrative about how much success the right has had. I mean, it seems to ignore a lot of the progressive wins that had happened, like the passage of Prop C. And it, I think we can essentially say that when we shift the mayoral election to the presidential election, like when we have big, broad, inclusive elections, that people vote, less extreme, right? And they are the grassroots people power movements that can get out there and do the door knocking and talk to neighbors about what's going on, that there's that potential for really getting people to vote in a progressive way. And so I think that I'm optimistic that going into November, which is going to be a bigger election, we should have some really good progressive issues coming forward, ballot measures. We've got now a candidate in the race, Aaron Peskin, that's, getting the progressive side energized. He had a massive turnout for his kickoff campaign. I went to Connie Chan's kickoff campaign. There was a massive union labor turnout there as well. So in spite of like what you would see on Twitter on Together SF and Grow SF's accounts, I think that their victories have been in small elections with small voter turnout, primarily people that are homeowners voting in those elections. And when we get to elections that are more representative, that have renters and people of all ages, as tends to happen when there's a presidential election, then we tend to see things go more progressively at the ballot.
Yeah, I would totally agree that there's so much in the reality of this city that conflicts with that, the narrative that's being put out there in terms of, particularly in terms of like that idea that the politics have shifted and that the people want, this other thing than, and Kristen mentioned, Kristen and Noah mentioned some of these things, but it also it includes like somewhat more anecdotal stuff, but like I repeatedly, at least in my neighborhood, like constantly, like consistently, whatever, watch my neighbors help out their homeless neighbors on the street. All sorts of things they're doing, whether it's just bringing them blankets, giving them food, helping them, take care of their animals. I mean, really, really generous, compassionate, like things with real meaningful relationships, and it's often small business owners, Kristen, and, like the coffee shop people that are giving these people free coffees every time they come by, or letting them use their bathroom, or, just all sorts of things like this where, what? It's not a city of homeless haters, actually. I don't believe that. I really don't. And then another example, just sort of the political bent again of the actual residents of the city. And I think part of the problem is those very people are extremely alienated from the political process, from electoral politics, and that's why we don't necessarily see that this reflected as much. And because of the invisibilizing that's going on, but I want to just point out the ceasefire resolution that happened a few months ago at the Board of Supervisors. I've been in the city over 25 years, I believe, and always involved in, lefty, progressive politics. I've never, ever seen that kind of turnout and that kind of passion and that kind of involvement, engagement amongst people who we're advocating for a position that's very, very, very solidly coded as left, right? Hard left, as they like to say, and yet these people repeatedly came out for a number of hearings, and there was public comment. So that's all they're doing is go and get 1 minute at the mic, right? The line was out the city hall and down the block, and like I said, I've been to budget hearings. I've been to, so many huge, what were known historically as just huge protests, right? Never in my life, right? And so here we are hearing all this shit about how, like, progressives are in the minority and people don't think like they used to in San Francisco, and, all this stuff that, again, has invisibilized or reduced, anyway. And to me, that was like a very powerful illustration, a very real, powerful illustration of actually a whole mass of people that wildly outnumbered the more like even moderate, as we say, the people that were saying we need to free the hostages or whatever, even let alone the more right or conservative, and they were there. They were down at City Hall. And they were taking time off work, and they were getting babysitters, and they were bringing their kids, and they were, challenged by language issues and disabilities and, poverty, and they were there. And there's photos, God damn it. So I think, I hate to say it, I was saying this to someone today, I just hate this, and because it feels like we're just always going to be perpetually disadvantaged. But I think just a huge, huge part of what's going on right now is a PR issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And maybe some money too.
Well, it's related. It's related.
Yeah.
They're able to do incredible, like I said, marketing campaigns. Yep. They own the media. They can buy and influence the media.
Yeah.
They have the people that get media attention and quotes in the media that they've influenced, or that they, and so that's why I say we're so disadvantaged, is why it makes me sad to say or admit that a lot of this is, a sort of messaging or PR, issue.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we can keep harnessing that left. If they're coming out that strong, hopefully
we're here. We're still here.
Exactly.
We are in large numbers.
Yes.
We exist.
Yes.
A lot of them are, it's like inspiring and amazing, are youthful and have energy.
Yeah.
And even time, because some of these people that are pretty left have a pretty left position on issues are now actually like working at tech companies and making decent money actually and have stable housing and like can actually give to elections or show up and take time out and go to City Hall or,
Yeah.
Support
Exactly.
local media.
unlike the old
the-
scrappy, impoverished hippies, of the old days.
Yeah. The Peter Coyotes and everybody else, the diggers. Awesome. Well, this was great. Thank you so much for taking the time from your day to speak. I really appreciate it. Hopefully we can do it again sometime. Maybe we'll, like on a happier topic. But anyways, have a wonderful week, and I will get this out on Thursday.
Thanks, Kevin.
Good.
Bye. Alrighty, thank you, Sarah, Kristen, and Noah for speaking with me. This has been a long one, so I'm just going to wrap it up. Thank you again for supporting the Doomloop Dispatch. Please like and subscribe to the show on YouTube or leave me a review on Apple and Spotify podcast. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram, so follow me there. And now I have my Patreon finally up. Please subscribe. I have a $1 support level for those that can't provide a lot, but the $5 level is pretty awesome. Not only will I take show suggestions from you, you'll get to access my long-form narrative podcast about underground music, Original Press, before anyone else. Now, I hope to see you next week and that you keep fighting the good fight. But I want to leave you with the highlight of last week from Ben Masilis of Midas Touch, discussing Donald Trump falling asleep during his hush money trial. Again, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.
Returning to the court proceedings as well, Maggie Haberman reports that Donald Trump continued to fall asleep during the proceedings as well. And, what I'm hearing from my sources as well is that, and I'm hearing from credible sources who know what's going on in the courtroom. And what I'm hearing is that take it for what it's worth, but that Donald Trump is actually farting in the courtroom and that it's very stinky around him. It's putrid odor in the courtroom, and that Trump's lawyers are like repulsed by the scent and the smell. And I'm not just saying that to be like, oh, funny. I'm actually, we have good sources there. And I'm hearing it from actual credible people that as he's kind of falling asleep, he is actually passing gas, and that his lawyers are really struggling with the smell. I think you'll actually start to hear more of that, but again, from real credible sources. Now, take it for what it's worth. They may be going off the record, on background and telling me that because of, it's the Midas touch, and they think that we want to hear that. So you could judge it how you want to judge it, but real credible people who are there saying that it's putrid around him.